We are surrounded by news media. Every day, we learn new things about our government, our favorite sports team, our university, our city, and our world. It informs us. It alerts us. It intrigues us. However, it can also swamp us. It can mislead us. It can misinform us, and it can misguide us. Much of this comes as a result of the 24-hour news cycle. The 24 hours news cycle, it sensationalizes the news, ignores a lot of the context that comes with presenting the news. It incorporates a lot of bias. It attacks the emotional state of its audience, and it offers rushed and inaccurate reporting. A 24 hours news cycle can often sensationalize the news. It chooses to ignore actually important and relevant news for its audience for more sensational and glamorous coverage. This happened a lot with recently with Ukraine. It happens with just about every American war, any military operation, anything along those lines. And that's very apparent with its coverage. So here's a graph. I think you can see it, but that's a graph of the coverage of the Ukraine war at the time. And at the high end up here, it's upwards of 21 hours of nonstop coverage of Ukraine. Here, where these, and this is typically your national, like at a Fox and CNN. And here are some of the low end, kind of 14 hours to 10 hours a day. And then these smaller ones are typically smaller news sources, but they're still spending a lot of time covering this issue. And it's also is typically paired with the ignorance of context. These outlets will ignore important details or just details from across the board. Instead, they focus on details that aid them and their station. This is obvious in Fox, CNN especially, because Fox is very Republican-based, CNN is very Democratically based, and they choose to they choose to ignore details that intrigue the other side of their audience. So a Fox audience, or Fox News will typically focus on the pieces that will engage a Republican audience and ignore the details that will intrigue a Democratic audience. And this context leads to a very partial view of the news. And these cycles are also often biased. They shape how they present the news. They pump out ceaseless coverage, just onslaught of coverage towards their target audience. And it's nonstop. It's 24 hours a day. You see it with the talking heads on television. There's all these shows that and a lot of them are talking about the same thing, but the personalities just try to keep you engaged every hour of the day. And that can just feed into you. And this happened a lot with disaster coverage, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or whatever it is. For disaster relief, if it's some networks will choose to paint, or most networks will choose to paint the president in a certain light, depending on what party he is. If it's a Democratic news outlet, they will choose to paint a Democratic president favorably in disaster relief and paint a Republican president non-favorably in disaster relief. And this goes the same the other way too. And it leads to a very biased and often inaccurate picture. There's also, these 24-hour cycles are pretty predatory on the viewer's well-being. They attack the emotions of the viewer to get them to feel something. They're trying to persuade you rather than present the news to you. And was very apparent in COVID. In COVID, they try to predate on the fear of the audience to get them to tune into their network, showing a lot of fearful statistics, or there's a lot of focus on fear of the audience to get them to tune into their station to find out what got worse today, basically. However, they also, in order to compete in the cycle, journalists are also predated on, but then they're also looped into it. They rush to be first. They have to rush to be first to break a story, to make money, and this leads to rushed, inaccurate reporting. This was highlighted in a Neil deGrasse Tyson interview when he talked about different journalists who report on him and other findings in the scientific community. Typically, they rush to be first, and they almost lie, saying a study is completed and it's accurate and it's truthful, when in reality, it's not. It's in its beta phase. To summarize, the 24 hours news cycle negatively affects the viewer, journalists, and the network, public perception, and sometimes even public policy.